This is our third Photoshop video, and we're going to cut a person out of a photo and see if we can place that part of the photo on top of another photo, and something that you'll probably want to do when you come up with your own Photoshop project. So let's go open the file from lesson 8 for selection methods. And this is going to take some patience, so you might not have all of these in your folder. Let's do selection sample. And what I want to do is cut this teacher out of the photo, even the hand where it's resting on the table. And there are lots of different selection tools. You can use the lasso tool, or you can select just a rectangular part of the photo. And I think we'll try some of these in other videos. But let's get right to a method that works probably the best on most photos. And that is to use this tool. And of these two, you want to make sure that you have the quick selection tool. So it looks like a paintbrush with a little lasso or marquee of dots around it. So find that quick selection tool. And first we're going to work on putting in a layer after we do some selection. So this is going to take a little getting used to. And first I'm going to start with the photo small, and then I'm going to zoom in to work more detailed and carefully. But once we have this tool selected, if you just click on your mouse and start selecting the area that you think you want to get rid of. I want to keep this gentleman, and I want to get rid of everything else. So notice I'm just dragging my cursor around. I'm holding down the mouse, hold down the left shift key, and then I also want to come over here, and now you can see it that I've just cut off his hand, but I'll come and fix that in a minute. So I've now got a lot of stuff that I want to cut out of the picture. So instead of selecting what I wanted to keep, I selected what I didn't want. And now to get this guy's hand back into the section that I'm going to keep, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then click with my mouse, and you'll see that now it's putting more in here. And I've grabbed a lot of stuff down here that's not really his hand. So when I let go of the Alt key and come back, I can. So when the Alt key is down, you're putting stuff back into that you want to keep. And when you let up, you're going in the other direction. So use the Alt key, don't use the Alt key. And now I'm actually going to try to cut out a little bit of this space under between his arm and chest here as well. And this, you'll see what it did first is it cut out his entire arm. So now I'm going to hold the Alt key down, and I'm going to try to paint over his sleeve to show that I want to keep the sleeve. And it's already doing a pretty good selection, and I also want to keep his hand. And there's a little bit that it cut out. So now what I'm going to do is zoom in to try and get this a little bit more accurate. So Control plus to zoom in, and let's go work on that hand area first. So zoom in as much as you want to, and you can see how when we did this selection tool with the large photo we couldn't see very well, but it's actually quite good around his sleeve. I kind of like the selection. But in his hand area, I was going to cut off part of his finger, and I was leaving quite a bit of this table. So now let's see if we can change. So when I hold down the mouse key and drag in, you can see that it does quite a bit better, but now I have to hold the Alt key and put back in his fingers. And better to keep at this point, because we can go fix it later, better to keep more of the photo so you know what you have to fix later. So I want to get his hand, but it would be nice if I could. So now I'm not holding the Alt key, and I'm going to take out some of this region. But that didn't do so well on his thumb, so now I've let go of the Alt key, and I want to try and get his finger back in here, put the Alt key back down, going in the opposite direction. Let go of the Alt key, take out some of this. And by the way, now I'm going to go up and reduce the size of the paintbrush. You can do even more accurate work if you use a smaller brush. So do you notice that my cursor got smaller? So now with a smaller brush, I can get even closer to the edge of his finger. And then the Alt key when I want to reverse the process for what's in and what's out. And I'm going to, so just keep reversing, hold down the Alt key, then don't hold down the Alt key. And I think I've probably got this about as good as I'm going to get it. And we can come back later and use a paintbrush. Here's a little area of his hand I was cutting out. Let's see if I can do a little bit better. I think that's a pretty good selection. And depending on where you're going to place your selection, you might feel like you don't even have to be quite this careful. All right, there's one thing here I'm going to show you. If I get a very small, I'm going to make the size of my brush even smaller, and I'm going to see what happens if I add just one more dot in here so I don't get such a curved cutout. And maybe I'll do right there as well. All right, now let's scroll and let's find that area under his arm. So let's scroll back up here and see how this was. Not so good at all. So let's see what we can do. Let's hold down the Alt key to get this part of his shirt back in. And then let's drag without the Alt key to see if we can get a better selection here. So this area, it will be an impressive selection if I can get this small cutout area to look realistic. And now I'm not holding down the Alt key. And now I am. Let's give it a chance to catch up there. All right, let's see what I can do here to get this shirt back in. I'm doing more harm at this point. So I'm holding down the Alt key to get this shirt back in. And I'm not holding down the Alt key. So I think that's a pretty good selection. Oh, except for right here maybe. Let's hold down the Alt key one more time. There's one weird spot. All right, I like that selection quite a bit. The more time you put in on the selection right now, the less cleaning up we'll have to do later. All right, let's see if I can get a little area here out. And how Photoshop is doing this is it's telling where the color changes a little bit. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, give that a little bit less. And let's get that in. All right, that's a good one. And then this little shape right here, let's see how we can do. And I think that looks fine. And then I'm not sure what this is about down here. It looks like there's a little something. So I'm just going to undo that. So I want to, whoops, sorry, go in the wrong direction. Hold down the Alt key. I want to get his belt back in. Otherwise he'd have an invisible spot. He'd have a cutout spot in his belt. So not sure how I got that in there. So any of those. And again, you can come back and fix them later if it's not working exactly the way you want. And here I see one more little place I could fix a little bit here. Let's see if we can get this in. It'd be nice if we had a little cutout in there. And hold down the Alt key. Let's make sure this finger gets in. All right, so now I'm going to do Control minus several times to zoom back out. And you could find any areas. An area that I maybe should have checked while I was zoomed in is above his ears. Now, you guys got the point here of carefully moving that line in and out. So if I zoom in, we'll see how well it did. And these are often areas that you can improve right away and then not have to do later. So you can see here, in fact, that it did cut out part of the ear here. So I'm going to hold the Alt key and get this to move out a little bit. And then I'm not holding the Alt key to get a little closer. And then I'm going to see if I can get a more realistic cut in under his ear there. And I might be able to do the same over here. And now I think that's going to be a very good selection. And you can, if you want to, you could work even on, hold down the Alt key and put in these little scraps of hair that come out. You hold down the Alt key and get that a little bit more. You don't want it to be too smooth because that's not going to look very natural. Oops, I forgot to hold the Alt key, so you can, that I'm sure will happen to you also. All right, I think I've got a nice selection here. Doesn't look, if I would get the Alt key held down. Okay, let me stop here before I actually make it worse. All right, let me zoom out again so that you can see your whole selection. And now remember that what we've actually selected here is not what we want to keep. We actually selected what we want to lose. And what Photoshop is expecting is for us to select the area we want to keep. So our next step is to go to the Select menu and choose Inverse. So what you're saying is do exactly the opposite of what I picked. I selected the part I wanted to lose rather than the part I want to keep. So the inverse says keep everything else. So you can watch what happens here when I chose inverse, and it completely reversed. And now it kept everything else. So now it's going to keep this guy. And now how are we actually going to lose that background? That takes a couple of steps. And now that I rethink, before we lose, before we actually do a layer to keep only that part, let's make use of this on your options bar up here. You should have a button that says Refine Edge. This gives you some options that will make your cutout look more natural. So if you give it just a little bit of a radius, and you could zoom in to see how that's going to work. Looks like I've kept part of the blackboard over here, by the way, but we could get rid of that later. All right, and adjust it so that we have a little bit smoother edge. And the feather is going to do things like make the edge not quite so harsh. But I wouldn't do very much here because we had a pretty good selection. The shifting the edge is any time that you do a selection and you can tell that you didn't get quite as close as you want to, you could shift to the negative. Or if you said your selection was too tight, you could shift out, and it will, in every direction, it'll move out just a little bit. So I don't think I had that problem here. If anything, I would shift just a little tiny bit in the positive, so small I can't get there. There's +1. You could click and type in that box as well. All right, so I think that's all that I'm going to do. This is something you'd have to experiment with, and it'll be different for each picture. So for example, if you're doing a close-up of a girl's face and she has hair that's really curly, you'll want to have a softer edge on the hair, otherwise it wouldn't look very natural. And that's where you could use these radius tools and feathering a little bit more to increase those. Okay, I'm going to click OK. And now we're back to our layer, and now you have to follow these steps very carefully. So once you've got all of this selected, and you can come back later still to click these, but I did my selection, and then I did the Refine Edge tool. And now what we're ready to do is to handle this as a layer, and we're going to, it's called a layer mask. So what I want to do right now is turn this into a layer mask, and it's this button down here at the bottom of the layer panel. So hover over it a minute to make sure that it tells you that that is the layer mask. And there it comes, but it showed up. It says add a mask. So when I click this, now you see what happened. It changed all of the part we didn't want into transparent. So this checkerboard isn't really going to appear. That's Photoshop's, and many software packages use this background to show you that you've got a transparent background. All right. I'm going to crop this later so that I'm only keeping this part of the photo. So this doesn't bother me very much, But here's how we can get rid of it, and we can also go back and make any adjustments. And that's using these foreground background tools down here and our paintbrush. So because we're in this brush tool, because we're in a layer mask, when I choose the tool down here, so now I've got this white tool, and I can make my paintbrush a little larger here so you can see what it's going to do. So if you see what this is doing with my paintbrush right now, is it's painting back in from the chalkboard. So that's definitely not the direction I wanted to go. So now switch from this foreground background, and there's this little tool here with arrows. If I click there, and now watch what my paintbrush will do. Now my paintbrush will be painting it out. And you can, of course, you've got built-in sizes of paintbrushes. This would be a huge paintbrush, so it will take out if I paint over the top of all of that. So that's the easiest way when you don't have to be careful to make sure that everything that you don't want is out of the picture. Look for that checkerboard. And this is going to be much more accurate if I zoom in again. So Control plus, zoom in several times, and now I could go back up and see if I got all the junk out up there on the board, and I didn't. So my paintbrush here. All right. So with the background tool, with the black, and now if you want to watch what happens, let's zoom in on the guy's hand again, since that's a good area for us to work with. You can see how we got a soft edge on the edge of his shirt because we chose that soften in the refine edge. And we're zoomed in a lot now, so we kind of like having that. When we zoom out, that soft edge is going to work well to make it look natural. But now let me make my brush tool smaller again so I can do some precision work. And so now I'm just going to do something I don't want to do here and paint right over his hand so you can tell which way we're going here. And then, so what I have selected right now, this black brush is removing. So I'm going to do Control Z. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. And maybe what I should do here is show you the history. So in fact, if I want to go back a step or two over here, I can just click and go backwards. So that also undoes. So you can go, if you wanted to go back 4 steps, you would just click 4 steps back. All right, so I want to change tools here. So I can use this arrow, and notice that then it changed to the white tool. And the reason I might want to do that is oops, sorry. Now I'm going in the wrong direction again. Let's click again. I want to take out a little bit more of this, and I can go to an even smaller, and I can type the size here. So I can go to a 2-pixel brush, and I could get out even another little, very careful area here so that it definitely looks like the edge of his hand. Now, I maybe should be zoomed in even more, and I'm not doing this very well while I'm speaking. So now you might say, oh, I think you took out part of his finger right there. So then I would simply choose these arrows to switch back, and now when I go over this area, it'll put back. When I paint over it, it'll put back part of his finger. So notice, I think it looks like maybe I cut out some of the edge of his little finger here. So I might paint back some there. And when I get too far, you'll see that if I go too far, then it's painting back the table that was under his hand. So then I simply switch back. So foreground, background paintbrushes. And if you have a small enough paintbrush, you can work really precisely. And I think I just did a bad job of that. But you guys can work very carefully here as you clean up. But overall, I think I had a pretty good cutout of his hand. And now while you're zoomed in, you could scroll all the way around. Here it might look like should add a little to his finger. Remember, that's the part that's flat on the table. So I don't want to take out more of that finger. I want to switch. So as I'm talking here, I'm forgetting which one I have selected. So I can paint back part of the photo. How it knows what color is you're painting back the photo. And now I went one step too far, so I'm going to switch again and remove just one little line there. All right, so I think we're pretty close to the edge of his hand. And you might want to, the areas that we worked on, there's that area under his arm. And I think that looks pretty natural. Looks good to me. Maybe that was on the other side. Let's try finding that area up under that arm. And see if we want to refine that, paint in or paint out. Whatever you took out, I think that's going to look just fine. Here, I don't know if it took out some of the color here. So we could say, let's see what I did. Oops, switch back. Let's paint back in the photo here. Okay, so I think this is just highlighting. This is just light from the photo. Okay, but you could paint over if you want to check to see if you've inadvertently erased something that belonged back in. And let's see how we did around his ear. I think that looks fine. Could paint back in a little maybe here. Okay, so let's say that we like this. We think we've got a good selection. The checkerboard shows us what isn't going to be there. And now I'm going to zoom back out, Control minus. And I could crop and make this photo smaller, or whatever you want to do with this now. One suggestion here might be that you might want to just save this as a PNG. So let's do save as. And now the only format of photos that will give you a cutout background. So I'm going to put hard key in front here. And I'm going to save this as a PNG. And I don't think I have to flatten it because it's only one layer. If in doubt, do the layer flattening first. All right, so I'm going to save this as a PNG. And I had done that once before, so yes, I'm just going to replace it. Compression, whatever, we're not too careful here, but it's not going to take a long time, so you might as well choose that slow method. All right, well, let me show you what I might do with this now that I have a PNG with a transparent background. So I have a Word file open. Let's go to Insert in Microsoft Word. Let's go to Insert Picture. And let me find that PNG that I just saved. And it doesn't look like anything happens here until I select it and choose Wrap in front of text. And now you can see wrapping in front of text. Now I can click and drag it. And no other photo would do that without covering up your background stuff. Oh, look at, I still have some garbage from the board there, I think. Okay, but you get the idea that if we did a good cropping or a good cutting. Here, by the way, I could take care of cropping still now because I don't really, that stuff on that chalkboard isn't going to be a problem. This is just that my tablet, this garbage, my tablet it won't be there. It just doesn't update the window fast enough. So do you see how a transparent background in a PNG image is what you want whenever you want to layer a cutout from one thing to another? So Photoshop is a great way to go to do that selection. All right, let's go back to Photoshop and see what else we could do now that we have this layer. Putting two photos together, and this video is getting long, so let's see if I can do this quickly. I'm going to go to Image and check the size of this image, and it's 8 inches, or you can look at pixels here, but the 8 inches is the safer bet here at 300 pixels per inch. If you go get a photo from a website, it's going to be small resolution. So you're going to have to be very careful about image size. I want to put this gentleman on top of another photo now. So what I'm going to do is open So Control O, I'm going to go back and let's open that castle photo that we worked on. That was in the backlight lesson 4. So take the one that you improved, and now let's look at the image size. And I want to make sure that it is plenty large. So notice this one was not 8 inches wide. So I'm going to go more than I need to. I'm going to make this 9 inches. And notice that it constrains the proportions. So it updated the height to match the width. And I'm going to click OK. So I think this is plenty big. So now I want to figure out how can I put this gentleman in front of the castle, the gentleman that I cut out. And this is the part that's hard to do on my tablet here while the screencast is running. But this is an interesting way to see this here. I have 2 files open, so I can go to Window, Arrange, and then I can tile so I can see them both. So you might choose how you want to split the screen. I'll do 2 vertical. So now what I need to do, and sometimes I get it the first time, I want to click on this photo. Oops, sorry. I don't want to do that. Let me undo. I want to have the Move tool selected. That would be important. I want to click on this, drag it up to the title, and then back in behind. And this time I got it first time, but I'm going to repeat that for you because that's not too easy. Select the Move tool, click on the photo that you want to drag in, drag it up to the title bar till you see the title bar highlight, and then drag it back down, and then you'll see the background appear, and then you'll get this message. Are you sure you want to change this colors with the destination? And just say yes. Just say okay. And now I actually don't need this version anymore, so I can use the close box or Control W, so I don't need that one. And now notice that I can click and drag this layer around. So I'm going to put this layer. How come it's hiding the teacher that we just cut out? Because it is on top. Remember that whatever layer is on top, this is the order of the layers. So now just grab layer 1, click and drag it below. And there is my gentleman leaning on the rocks in front of the castle. And notice that I can move my layers around here however I want. If you do that, though, remember that that photo actually continues quite a bit over here. So you might decide that you're going to crop that layer. If you want to change the size, it's better if you deal with that first because you're going to distort it a little bit. But if I want to make this gentleman smaller, I have his layer selected. So there's a choice under Edit called Free Transform. And if I click that, then it gives me these corners that you're expecting to see. Make sure you drag proportionally, otherwise you can see how I could make him tall and thin. But that's the easiest way of the choices if you want to change the size here. And then we could put him back wherever we want to. So it looks like he's leaning on that rock. Now, if I want to save this as a final project, then I want to flatten the 2 layers together. If you think you want to come back to work on this some more, then what we haven't talked about is that you save it as a PhotoShop project. So this PSD PhotoShop extension will allow you, so it saves it as layers, and then you could come back tomorrow and change your mind and work on the layers. Once you flatten the layers, then it becomes one single layer. So you can decide. You could save it both ways. You could save it as a PSD Photoshop project so that you could come back and work on it later, or you could flatten the 2 layers. Oh, notice here that's garbage still from the board. So you might want to do some cropping on that layer before you continue. But this video is plenty long, sorry. So I'm going to go to Layer, flatten the 2 layers into one image, and then I can do File, Save As, and make sure you give it a new name. So I might say hard key cutout selection. You could name it whatever you want to, but you want to practice putting one photo cutout on top of another layer and hit save. All right? and more later. This you can just say yes, as big a file as you want.